Do we have an intro?
I mean, this is the intro. This whole episode is the intro.
This is the intro? Oh, we're feeling already incredible. I think what I mean is we talk about Discworld.
Yes. So that's it. That's the podcast. We talk about Discworld.
No, that's not the podcast. Don't put words in my mouth. We talk about Discworld for very specific reasons, which mostly pertain to Terry Pratchett, some kind of messianic figure.
Okay.
Put it like that yourself. Don't look at me like that.
Let's take it on steps by steps.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, fine.
We cannot be the first people that are doing some Terry Pratchett Discworld retrospective. That's overall what we're going to be doing. We're going to go through all the Discworld books and read them and talk about them. But why are we doing that on the year of our goddess 2026?
All right, firstly, are you sure we aren't the first ones, though? Like, who else has done it? That YouTuber with a skull for a PFP has talked about it twice, maybe. But that's the only one I can think about.
I mean, there are other Discworld podcasts.
Are there?
I think there's a repository of them. In fact, I'm not sure what any of them have to say. You're going to learn, listener, as you hear us talk about this. I have very little pre-existing perspective on Discworld, and I've tried to keep it that way.
Yeah, we are bullying you.
Yeah, something like that.
You will be bullied into learning. You mean force Pratchett. You're being forced Terry. There you are.
I'm for your 4 p.m. Terry pilling.
Yeah.
We are Terry Maxing. We are disc mugging.
No. Back on track before this becomes too much to handle. So there are people who have talked about Terry Pratchett, and then they stopped.
Well, the books also stopped.
Well, because he died.
Yes.
Many such cases.
The day when he died, I was in a car with a bunch of girls from university. We were going back home from a lecture, and I got a text, Terry Pratchett died. I got so sad. I was also high as fuck, to be fair. But I was extremely sad about it, because it kind of had been a big part of my life. Kind of what got me into really reading fantasy in a more critical way, I suppose. Not just cool, elf. Ain't that great?
As Queen mentioned, which I guess at some point we should introduce ourselves.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'm Lucy.
I'm Quinn.
I'm on.
As Quinn was saying, we have different degrees of experience. Quinn is, on one end, completely inexperienced on Discworld and trying to remain as much that way as possible. I have read all books, some of them more than once.
And I'm Italian, and that's important because not all the books came out in Italy. And when I was a teen, I read almost all the ones that did, and I sort of caught up during those two that were trickling in. But the thing is, the Italian translation of Terry Pratchett is something like 10 to 20 years behind on his catalog. I have read most of, I suppose, the first half of Terry Pratchett, plus a few books from the second half that I got specifically sent to me in English.
Yeah.
I am the perfect midway point, perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Okay, yeah. This is exciting. There was a swing at this in some form a couple of years ago, which is to say, in terms of fully, properly, adequately contextualizing my experience, I read the first book. I also relatively poorly retain what happens in any piece of narrative media more than 6 weeks after I've engaged with it. So we'll see what happens in terms of how surprised I am by what that book has inside of it when we talk about it.
Paper. No, right, not paper, because everyone reads ebooks now. I forgot about that.
No, I like paper books. I
That's fair.
have my first 3 books in paperback, so I am going to be reading those physically.
Oh, I like paper books, especially if I've made the cover of them. I like to get those. I think there is too many Terry Pratchett books for me to get all of them in paper. I don't know. I will not know where to put them.
Yeah, you will replace the mattress. Just sleep on books.
I could replace the frame of the bed and put the mattress on top of them. That's the most 2010 hipster thing. Think about it. It's like a Tumblr image.
Mm-hmm.
A book constructed bed. And probably there is a Sherlock poster somewhere in the picture.
Oh, for sure.
Why Discworld? Why Terry Pratchett? Why now?
You see, it's been a while, but about 10 years ago or something, kind of started a movement where people figured out that a lot of the big writers were not as cool as they thought, thanks to J.K. Rowling, mostly starting the trend by being transphobic on socials and people noticing and then being, wow, a lot of the things that this woman wrote are really messed up, actually. How comes we never figured it out before? Good question. And then during the years, a bunch of the more respected heads fell. Neil Gaiman got a couple TV series done of his works, and then the allegations. Alan Moore, which is a lot. And Terry Pratchett somehow remained the only guy completely untainted, completely untouched. In fact, legitimately, every time something happened, he became a little cooler, and people started latching onto this.
Right, as Britain is being drained of anything people thought was worth cultural respect or affection.
Absolutely. They were like, who can be the great British author if all of these ones have failed? They did that shirt, you know? They're like, J.K. Rowling couldn't make it, Philip Pullman was busy, blah, blah, blah. I am Terry Pratchett. They did exactly that shirt, which they landed on Terry Pratchett as the great British fantasy author, essentially. Which, good choice, don't get me wrong. Possibly the only one who has never done anything wrong. Then they stopped. It was a fad for a few years, and then people just kind of stopped talking about Discworld.
And I guess the thing is that most people were interested on the idea about that. You're right. It was around 10 years ago, which was when people actually cared about, it was the time of the woke, where actually people kind of pretended to be concerned with social justice. It was cool to virtue signal, and everyone kind of went a bit mask off and stopped caring.
Mm-hmm.
Most of people that made the pretense of not liking Rowling, but then discreetly doing their thing, they are just openly doing their thing now. They are just openly excited for some nonsense new series or whatnot. People stop at, there's no social ramifications from this, so what the hell? We don't care. We just don't care. So, and also the other thing is that I don't think many people actually read the books.
No.
They love cherry pick quotes and drop them without context on social media, and that's it.
Right. I think I was reading an interview with critic and creative Austin Walker the other day, and he was talking about his time at the video game publication he was EIC for, Waypoint, where there was a sense that a lot of the criticism that they were doing was important. However, a lot of the audience would acknowledge, we should talk about the way that games and the carceral state or arms manufacturing are intertwined or, relate to one another. That's important work, but I don't want to read it. And I think to some extent the same thing happens with Pratchett, though Pratchett is not as explicitly upfront saying this is important cultural critique. But I think the same cultural tides that produced that response are why people didn't read Pratchett. And now that the cultural tide of fascism has just become so overwhelming, nobody even pretends to care anymore, except for people who maybe actually do.
Everything's gotta be cozy these days.
Don't get me started on cozy.
Let me get there. It kind of makes you think like, oh, Terry Pratchett. It can be read as cozy. It's like, funny, sort of entertaining fantasy with that breaks a bunch of norms and stereotypes. The problem is that then when you actually get into what Pratchett is saying, the number of repostable quotes and relatable things doesn't even hold a candle to the satire.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the more he goes in. At the beginning, it's kind of like, oh, we're making fun of fantasy with an eye towards the social, and making fun of the way the fantasy portrays society. It's very inside baseball sometimes. But the more it moves forward, it's more like pointing at you and going, cops shouldn't do this. Do you get it? Do you?
And because it has to be so cherry picked, because if you included sometimes the whole paragraph will already not be so cozy, it ends up being the same thing as with another author, which this happens a lot with, which is Ursula Le Guin, is that then it ends up being always the same three quotes, and it's exhausting. because it's really the only ones that work it.
Are you perhaps pretending that Terry Pratchett is like a modern Le Guin?
They are kind of contemporary.
A successive Le Guin. I get it, but to me, because of the way the books came out in Italy, to me, Le Guin is like a 20 years before Terry Pratchett thing. And I know it's not true, but my brain can't fucking stop.
Yeah, I would say a lot of similarities. I'm trying to figure out, I cannot really remember a quote that if it was a little longer was completely different context. But there is this massive run on one of Le Guin's books that it gets quoted over and over, which is a very second wave feminism, magical divine femininity nonsense that goes for a while, and it can be super turfy. That rant is quoted verbatim. The very next line is not quoted, which is our protagonist going, "Don't know about that. I think that's entirely wrong."
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And people do that with Pratchett a lot. Not just with quotes, but like, I don't know if you've ever seen someone point at like Ankh-Morpork, the way that Veterinaria runs Ankh-Morpork, especially in like the middle to latter half of the books, and being like sort of painting it as aspirational, which if you ever read one of those books, you will understand that cannot be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think this points us toward answering Lucy's question of why Pratchett, right? People stop talking about Pratchett. We want to deconstruct to some idea the notion of there being a great British fantasy author. That's something we want to problematize. We don't need to get fully into that right now. But there's also this question of what was he actually saying?
Yeah.
Whether that is Terry Pratchett is our glorious woke king, or these are books that were created in historical context and discursive milieus, which are naturally complicated.
Yeah, these days he only gets remembered whenever someone has to be like, do you know of one fantasy author that was ever nice to trans people? And they'd be like, yeah, that Sir Terry was nice to trans people. And that's the only thing, which, to be fair, kudos.
Sure. It's just also interesting the way that gets bundled up and packaged as everything the guy thought or said was super good.
Yeah.
And as the person here who's the most ignorant, I don't know. I'm interested to find out, and I want to keep an open mind.
Yeah, but you also know that he's British, so how good can he be?
Right.
Look, this is the good author. These are the British silence. How good can he be?
As Quinn said, we kind of want to put it on both a materialist context and also a context of social constructivism, how that plays with the ideas of fantasy, with the ideas of genre, with the ideas of, with the ideas of ideas, because Terry Pratchett was very much in love with those. And we are going to go book by book. We are going to try to go over what the book is about. Like what, if we look at the blurb of the book, if we look at how the book is discussed around pop culture or in scholarly circles, what the book is supposed to be about. And then we make a summary of what actually happened on the book that we just...
Much unlike every other podcast that talks about books, we have a method. That one makes us good.
I mean, Just King's Things has a good method.
Yes.
Like literally the one.
Making unsubstantiated claims is my thing, okay? That's a role that I've picked in this podcast.
The idea of that is that we already expect to be some clash between what the book proposes it to be, what is actually be about, and its context. So we already expect there to be some meat there of analysis. We also expect themes to emerge. Because we have 3 levels of experience with the books, the idea is that Queen, because they are the new, fresh set of eyes, they identify different themes on a book. They present to us the themes that they see on the books. We go and approach each theme one by one. So Queen exposes why they saw that theme and why they thought it was worth of discussion. Then we add our own participation into that. And And finally, we try to give support information that the reader in 2026 might not have, like what it's like to reading this book when it came out, the social context on which this was written, Terry Pratchett's biography, etc. And after we go over this thematic analysis book by book, we do a final points round robin, in which everyone has kind of to say something else that maybe did not merit a full team. And already from this, you can see that we are not here to do a joke review. We are to touch the thoughts of Sir Terry Pratchett, see how those are expressed on the books, and see if even today, so many years later, they are still worth considering, and if they still raise some interesting questions.
We are going to try to be funny because it's a podcast. And if we're not entertaining, no one's going to listen to it. That's the hard law of marketing. But that does not mean that we are here just to make a laugh out of reading these books. We're actually here to do materialistic analysis. If that's not what you want, it's not maybe the podcast for you.
Yeah, also we are not just going to be reading aloud Terry Pratchett jokes or writing them.
Yes, absolutely.
I will do exactly zero writing.
We're taking this seriously, basically. And we have a lens through which we are approaching that seriousness.
It's called ADHD.
Sometimes, yeah.
I think part of the aspect of doing it serious is that our idea is to grab a book and, we kind of need to consider them between, was it an artifact of its time and it should remain there? Because we're going to consider it a book that still is making me think. It has transformed me reading it. Still has a lot to say to me now. We are kind of to figure between those because, in a way, let's imagine that Terry Pratchett is really everything that the hype tells about. We kind of want to see which books are worth reading and which books actually excel at that element. Because if there is still transformative potential, I think people should not deny themselves that by not reading. But also, it's extremely daunting to, just read 80 books bibliography? That's how much he wrote?
I will read most of them. I will not touch anything with a protagonist called Moist, because it's called Moist. I can't. It's so unpleasant.
I also want to say, with making this call, right, on an episode by episode, book to book basis, right, is there something here, or is this worth sort of leaving in the past? I can only speak to myself here. My answer and my feelings about texts are subject to change over time. The report that I give you on an episode is how I felt at that time, and an investment in this method is as likely to be transformative as any other given thing. I might decide at one point, this book sucks, leave it in the past, and other bits of ongoing analysis, other things that emerge out of reading new texts might cause me to reconsider that. And the opposite might be true, where I think, yeah, this is great. There's actually something going on here thematically. It feels resonant or transformative. And then I find out as we read something else, oh, he just took another swing at this and did it way better. However, given the body of work that we're dealing with, I'm not going to tell you what I feel about every single book every single time, or that's going to take the entire runtime of every episode. So I just want to give a disclaimer that we are on shifting terrain, or at least I am.
Both of those things will happen at a constant rate, by the way. You could cut the entire body of work of, at least the one that I have read, which is not even all of it, the entire body of work of Terry Pratchett in half, or even in third, if you only read the best version of an attempt that he has ever done. A lot of the books are just him going, maybe I want to do that again. Let me try again. Let me do this again. It keeps happening.
Yeah, so listeners that are familiar with Terry Pratchett, you could be assured that that happens a lot, which is always visiting the same well and taking another swing at it. This is a shifting stance. This is why we include on the method biography, the context, who Terry Pratchett was at that moment, because again, We have to take in consider what he tried before and what he changed. And again, and sometimes it's for the worse, because the Moist books are clearly another attempt at a swing at something that probably might have been actually nailed the first time, but he kept going at it, for example.
Are you gonna make me say it during episode 0? Really? Are you gonna make me say it? Are you gonna make me take this position, the staunch position of moving pictures defender, before we get?
Ah.
Oh, I was actually thinking the truth.
I mean, good for you.
I don't know what this means.
Oh, it's the name of a book. But,
I figured it was,
Yeah, I never.
I don't know what any of that signifies.
Good.
I'm excited to find out.
Yeah.
I think this points to an idea that is important, that iteration is not always a straightforward linear progression to the most complete or perfect version of an idea.
That was essentially the conception of art that existed in like Middle Age Italy. Castle, I'm a former history of the arts university student, whatever. That was the conception of how art worked back in the day. You find it in Dante, in Purgatorio specifically, where he essentially does this thing where it's like a bunch of artists talking about they were better than the ones before, but then one day someone will come and they will inevitably be better than them. And art is a constant straight line of betterment, essentially. 2026, and we probably have proven that's not true. Otherwise, the TTRPG scene sure will look a lot different.
Yeah, I am far too postmodern in orientation, post-structuralist in my understanding of things to subscribe to that model.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we should all be. It's just funny that we're still, in some way, we're still litigating ideas that belong to 13th century.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. This is a good jumping out point to something else, is that Terry Pratchett, again, it goes back to people maybe not actually reading the books or not thinking about that. For someone that is so well loved, that's something that the quality of his writing is so acknowledged. His footprint is extremely small. Just look at the size of the footprint of the British woman, or the footprint of Alan Moore, or the footprint of Neil Gaiman. Considering the body of work, considering how well regarded he is, considering how he, for all intents and purposes, seems to be extremely nice and never hated anyone, why his impact on literature, on pop culture, is so tiny. An element that I think we're going to be coming back again is try to answer this, try to explain why he's actually producing this excellent art. If everyone in general has at worst a neutral position on Terry Pratchett,
Right.
has fantasy outgrown these books? Why are not other authors writing more like Terry Pratchett? Because so many people are saying that they are inspired by Terry Pratchett, but nobody is writing like he did. Who is doing stuff like this now?
We have some names. I've read an embarrassing amount of fantasy, and I can probably count on like one hand. Well, the fingers of one hand, otherwise it would just be a one. The fingers of one hand. How many books I think just make me go like, there's Pratchett DNA in this. We can trace it back. And they were all bad, by the way. No fault of Terry Pratchett, but they were all pretty bad books. And there is exactly one British author that I can think of who is independently published at Transfem, among other things, who I legitimately read today and go, this is exactly Terry Pratchett. Not as in the style of Terry Pratchett, but this evokes in me the same feelings and moves on the same steps. Like with the same sort of brilliant, sarcastic way of talking about something horrible and making it funny until you think about it. Exactly one author that I can think of. Though she is British, so at the very least, that's consistent.
Right. And I guess I have two thoughts in this regard. And one of them is Pratchett didn't emerge from a vacuum, right? We've already talked about, to some extent, him being in conversation with fantasy. But I think that there's other forms of comedy that he's also in conversation with that are in the sphere of, British comedic traditions. And I think there's something to be said about the devalorization of comedy as something which structures or influences generic modes. But I also want to say, speaking to the size of the footprint, my own experience, right, as an American who most of my exposure to the ideas around Discworld historically were from nerd spaces where it was often mentioned in the same breath as Monty Python. And I've never enjoyed Monty Python all that much. So when the footprint I'm seeing sits inside of the footprint of Monty Python in the context of my own life and exposure, obviously I'm not going to give that much credence based on my own personal tastes.
I think the lack of analysis of Terry Pratchett strikes again here. That people just go like, he's a funny British man, kind of absurdist comedy sometimes. What's another funny British absurdist comedy thing? Monty Python, there you go. They did a thing with knights, that's basically the same, right?
Yeah, like, oh, you want Monty Python that is less transphobic and less racist. Terry Pratchett.
It's not how it works.
Apparently it is.
I also legitimately never got Monty Python, but that might just be me. I'm too Italian.
No, I'm with you.
You need to be British, something.
Or Canadian.
Or a Tibu.
Or what?
A Tibu.
Are we a boomer?
For British people.
Yeah.
Oh, I am so angry. I am so damn angry now. Oh no. Oh no. I haven't heard that word in years, and I've never heard it pronounced. I only ever read it. It's gonna stick with me for a week.
But yeah, there is a lot of interest in this question of why don't we see the impact that seems to be accorded to the quality of the stuff that he has produced. And question or a perspective I'm holding open is that there is a trajectory of influence of Pratchett, but it's people taking any number of things that I personally find to be the least compelling or interesting things that Pratchett is doing, right? Any given author, any given work, you can pull any number of threads from that. And I'm curious to see if what's happened is they've just picked all of the least interesting threads and run with them, or if there is just no footprint or a very minimal footprint to speak to.
I think a lot of what happened too is Pratchett laying the foundation for moving past something, and then people just moving past it without necessarily reflecting on how he did that, and just landing on a new thing that completely misses the point.
Certainly. And some of this also works in the opposite direction, right? There is the inertia of history. There's a sort of simultaneous pointing out, carving a new direction, and then people maybe not doing anything all that interesting with that new direction. And then if we're talking about fantasy literature, there is just the sort of belching steam engine of Tolkienalia. And ways, again, even that outside of the things that were actually in those texts, that imagery, that imaginary has taken root in fantasy literature and pop cultural production, broadly speaking, right? You can't outrun the train.
Yeah, if there is a thing that I appreciate from Terry Pratchett, it's how little interest on any of the Tolkien nonsense he has.
He grows past that pretty quickly. A couple books that are less Tolkien, more Conan, if anything. And then he goes like, I'm tired now. I'm going to talk about weird British elves or something. And Margaret Thatcher.
British elf.
Oh, I mean,
yeah, you said he didn't hate anyone. Pretty sure he hated Margaret Thatcher, though.
I said anyone. Demons from Hell don't count.
That's true. Anyone as in people, which clearly Margaret wasn't one.
And there's an edge in critical direction, even in the small bit of reading that I've done, right? I've read that one book, and there is an anticipation of the neoliberal turn that is palpable in that text, even as, you know, the next section of the book is, let's talk about Conan, right? Let's play with pulp.
Yeah.
And I think that is something worth talking about. Again, his emergence from or drawing upon different milieu of fantasy that, again, historically are subordinate to your Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons style of what fantasy looks like.
I'm going to say Dungeons and Dragons owes to Pratchett more than he wants to admit.
Oh, yeah.
And the amount of mediocre Guild Association run series that pop up in the history of Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons and Dragons light fantasy games, or even just like kitchen tables, is latching at the throat of Ankh-Morpork like a vampire.
That makes sense to me, especially because the people who are likely to actually be doing that kind of thing are the kinds of nerds who are likely to have a larger appetite for fantasy works in general.
Absolutely. I was going to say a lot of things that I will. Then I thought, I'm going to keep them for the episode where we talk about that book, because otherwise you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and also I was thinking, I'm definitely interested to see that on step with the direct passages from the book.
Oh, you know that every time I say, a certain things in this recording, certain things, certain books, certain games, in my mind there is a clear culprit. I'm just keeping it for the moment where I can point at it, kind of Phoenix Wright style.
Yes, of course.
I know who you are.
For sure. Are there any other important bits about the method, the process, the ostensible aim of the project that feel important to talk about here?
I think the entire project can kind of be summed in a single way, which is trying to answer the question, or what King Terry Pratchett, is he exactly the same kind of communist that I am?
Right.
There is a classic danger with, we were talking about earlier, like relatable quotes, right? There's a classic danger that happens when you are the kind of artist that makes a lot of relatable content, because then everyone is like, he thinks exactly the same things that I think, and you might not always be correct about that. Maybe a quote from a book does not encapsulate the entirety of a person. I say this like it's some kind of revolutionary thought and not like something that everyone should know. Yeah, I say this like it's not obvious, and people will be like, no, come on, that's obvious. I know that. And you don't know that.
A lot of people, they seem to think that if an author writes something on the book, and not only are they endorsing it, they actually did that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we live in the world of short form content, basically, where everything is short, bite-sized, decontextualized, and that expects to be a sufficient, robust statement in and of itself. And I was going to say there's some benefits to that, but I am very skeptical of that landscape, generally speaking.
If there are benefits, I have not seen them.
Yeah, I guess I didn't want to be outright dismissive, but...
No, I will.
Yeah. There is an imagination or construction of Pratchett that emerges from these things. And like I said, it becomes very easy for people to latch onto that, say, yes, this is all the same kinds of things that I think or believe, as well as my thought has completely escaped me. So I don't remember what the other thing I was going to say was, but I'll circle back to that if I remember.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. And now it happened to me too. I love ADHD.
Recuperation. It was recuperation that I was going to talk about.
Okay.
Oh, right. So that the actual ideas of Terry Pratchett are being recuperated by the image of Terry Pratchett on social media and other short form content.
To some extent, but also there's a notion that if a text, right, somebody makes a story and it has ideas that point toward a radical politics, that in some way that actually positions itself against the systems it is nominally criticizing, which is often not the case.
I think with Pratchett is the kind of situation where the waters are very muddied, and the guard books specifically, it's really hard, I think, to read the guard books and find a single political position. But then you go on to discussing with people, socials, LGSs, wherever people talk about Terry Pratchett, and everyone seems to be under the impression that the Guards book are espousing a rather progressive, constantly espousing through their main characters a very progressive anti-establishment view of how to run a city, which is not exactly what comes through the text, I think.
I have a lot to say about what the watch books are about, and it touches a lot of things like Discworld, but I'm gonna save that until we get to actually the watch. But I think the point about recuperation is that maybe because there is so much resistance to recuperation in Terry Pratchett's material, is why he has such a small footprint. And the works that actually get that footprint are the Watch books that they keep trying to make series about it, and his works with Neil Gaiman, which, because they are easier to recuperate, they are the ones that actual capital keeps trying to make over and over, because so much content on those books, so much diversity, and they keep trying to make over and over and over and over again the Watch a thing in other media. They try to really to make the Watch an IP.
Right. And this speaks to something I want to be clear about in the way that I am talking about recuperation. Just for any listeners who might have any sort of assumption about the way that I'm talking about this, the actual intent or politics of an author, right, of Terry Pratchett is or are often largely immaterial to the project of recuperation. These might be things Pratchett seriously, genuinely believes, or any given author might seriously, genuinely believe, and that doesn't make it immune to capture by capital. That is something that is almost constantly happening. And so it's not me trying to say the ways in which Terry Pratchett did or tried to or failed to speak, I guess, in a very 90s sort of way, sell out.
And again, we have the example of that on Alan Moore, because Alan Moore believes very hard against everything that whoever has any power or the owning class or decision making on media is created, and still his work has been, almost every single piece of its work has been recuperated and recuperated and recuperating, and his entire existence is.
You can't stop people from jacking off to Rorschach.
You cannot stop people jacking off.
I can with a hammer.
Which speaks to...
And then I will be committing Watchmen. See, it's a circle.
But that also speaks to something that is important in this notion of recuperation for me, which is radical or seemingly radical ideas within the place of a text is not self-same with actually attempting to undertake action or transform the space of reality or possibility in the world. They can inform one another, but writing a book that says, a cab or whatever isn't the same as trying to disassemble the infrastructure and the system of policing.
Yeah.
Just as a general note.
That's true. I don't have anything to add. That's just like, yeah, pretty much.
I think to many of us this is obvious, but I want to be clear in approaching a critical project with clear eyes and to be clear with listeners about, what do we mean when we talk about radical or interesting ideas being present in Pratchett? It doesn't necessarily indicate that those things are going to be transformative of the world, right? We're not saying, well, if Pratchett was more popular, the world that we live in right now would look radically different. Maybe it would require a radically different structure of the world for Pratchett to be popular. I don't know that I'm convinced of that, but I don't have enough context.
Yeah, it's not like he wasn't popular anyway. Point of order. Pratchett held this title of the most stolen author in the UK for a long time, which is kind of a joke because instead of buying it, they're stealing it, and so you can claim the most something. But still, that means that there is enough of a popularity to his job that people are legitimately stealing his job in a quantity that can be appreciated, and that's not nothing. I think that in closing consideration, this is also just like three weird queer people with an history of overanalyzing media.
Yeah, I mean, there is an extent to which we're doing this because we are going to find the act of doing it pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no need to overstate this sometimes as something that is more than, right, three freaks trying to find something that they enjoy.
On the other end, if three freaks are the ones who are doing it with the most seriousness that can be mustered by the entire literary community, someone's lost the plot like a long time ago.
Well, critic has died. As Queen mentioned with Waypoint. What happened to Waypoint?
Yeah.
Remind me again.
They were hollowed out. Everyone was fired. The corpse laid there for a while, and then it was revived as a sort of shambling corpse by Capital. So
that sounds like the plot of a Pratchett book. I won't even lie to you. Not even like a hypothetic, like a specific Pratchett book. So
wonderful.
Yeah, I think we are pretty set.
Yeah. So next time with Color of Magic. The book that everyone tells you to skip because even supposed Sir Terry Pratchett fans hate reading Terry Pratchett.
Telling people to skip Color of Magic is like telling people to skip season 1 of the new Doctor Who. You are a Philistine, a coward, no taste. Go hide under a rock before I find you. Christopher Eccleston is the best thing that happened to New Who, and I want to stop pretending that that's not true.
As someone who has Doctor Who experience that doesn't extend all that far beyond that first season, I kept up for a few seasons. I think that's great. And as someone who has only read that one Pratchett book, if people are telling people to skip this one, it really evokes a sense of confusion or disorientation in me in terms of either how much are people taking different things away from this than I am, or am I supposed to understand this as a contrast of, oh, the other books are so much better or have so much more to say than this first book, which I don't know. I think that there's at the very least some ideas there that I'm excited to talk about, and I'm excited to see what the other books have to say as well.
And until next time,
We still don't have a sentence to close the podcast, so we'll see what we come with.
good enough.
Bye!
Bye! And I hope that Terry Pratchett is the same type of communist as you are, listener.